Here's to the crazy ones. The misfits. The rebels. The troublemakers. The round pegs in the square holes. The ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them. Because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
Hey friends, Mark Mandel here. Welcome to episode number 6 of Customer Experience Tales from the Trenches. Thanks for coming here with me on this journey. I'm so glad that we're together today. You know, I showed that Apple video in the past a couple of times, and I am such an Apple fanboy. I can't even begin to tell you, but in part because of that video. And we're going to touch on that video a couple of times during this show while we're together today. I think it's going to be really fun to be able to have talks about being mavericks or getting out there and being change makers and talking about, you know, as the ad says, people who are crazy enough to believe they could change the world are the ones who do. And we're going to touch upon all that as we get started here today. You know, we're going to have a really action-packed show. So I actually had to write up show notes today. So it keeps me on track and keeps me honest about what we're going to go over because we have a lot of material to go through today while we're together. So let's get this started without any further preamble. What is this show about? If you haven't seen this show before, it's called Tales from the Trenches for a reason. And what we're here to really talk about today in some sense of depth is all the things that are really going on in the customer experience realm, whether that be as practitioners who work for brands on the client side or as supplier vendors on the seller side. But who are the people making the differences? Who are the people making, the impact on customers and their experiences day in and day out? And we want to, instead of making a show about products or making a show about, marketing ideas, we really want to turn it into a conversational show where you can, in fact, be the fly on the wall and listen to a conversation between a couple or a few people sitting down and really talking about the work that we all do and we love. So thank you for being here for that. It's going to be a great show today. In fact, it's going to be, I think, the best show we've done yet. So here's the game plan for today. We're going to get into, in just a moment now, a brand new segment on this show. This is now the 6th episode of this show. We do it once a month. And this new episode, or this new segment in this episode, is going to be an awards episode. And I'm doing that as a way to give gifts. We're now in the holiday season, and I really wanted to give some gifts to people in the CX world who I think are out there being those people, like the people in the Apple ad, making that difference. So we'll come back to that in just a couple of minutes. I'm also going to do my book club segment after that, where I'm going to give away a CX book that I think is terrific. And you guys have always responded well to the book club segment, so thank you for that. Then we're going to turn around and we're going to have an interesting conversation with a guy who I think is going to give you so much to think about that I don't even want to give you a teaser about it. I just can't wait to have that conversation. And then we're going to talk a little bit more after we wind up there, just about the holiday season before we wind it down. But before we get into any of this, guys, I really wanted to take a moment and talk about a pretty big announcement. A pretty big announcement because we're going to be changing this show starting in January in the next episode. And what we're going to be doing starting January is I'm going to be having a full-time co-host here. And some of you guys have met him about a week ago on a different show that we put together, he and I. His name is Ian Gruber. And if you don't know Ian Gruber, check him out. He's one of the original guys in the kind of the customer experience and customer engagement world. He's been in the space a long time. And he's asked me, he reached out and said about a month ago, hey, could I do that show with you as like your partner, your co-host? And I couldn't imagine a bigger gift from anybody than the offer to do that. And so Ian and I are going to be doing this show as partners starting in January. More on that to come later. Let's take a moment while we're here, and I want to talk about a wow moment. And I want to do that in the form of giving away 3 awards, or kind of 3 recognitions of different people in our space. I call them kind of my Changemaker Award, my Brains and Brawn Award, and we're going to call a Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't know why I think I'm credentialed enough to be giving awards out at all, but I'm here to do that because there are a few people that have had this impact on me professionally or personally over the years. And I really wanted to recognize them and just take a moment, being that we're in the kind of this holiday time frame, just to give back and say, hey, thank you for being who you are. The first one, is the gentleman. If you don't know him, you need to know him. His name is Curtis Koff. And I want to give Curtis Koff, currently the Vice President of Customer Experience at a company called Insulet, my Changemaker Award. I'm going to take a moment here and talk about Curtis and why I made this decision. Curtis is a friend. Curtis is an ex-client. But what Curtis is about, Curtis has had one hell of a CX career. Right? I remember when I first met Curtis, he had just come into a company that I have great respect for called Alaska Airlines up in Seattle, Washington. He came in as an outsider from the travel industry and said, let's go take this travel industry old company and shake it up and bring all sorts of new thinking around customers and customer experience in particular into Alaska Airlines. And he helped drive them from going as a middle of the pack player in regional and US travel to amongst the top in terms of their customer centricity. And Curtis came in because he came in from the outside. He came from companies like Amazon and Microsoft and had no prior disposition. And when you think about the work that we do in CX, the biggest Achilles heel that we run into is that prior disposition, right? It's the knowledge of the fact that we do things today the way we have because we've always done them that way. And thinking about the mindset of always having done something a certain way, that's the biggest blocker to change. And Curtis came in with what I'm going to call a beginner's mind and said, why do we do them that way? Let's change it up. Let's make it different. So Curtis Koff, here's to you, my friend. You are getting my 2024 Changemaker Award, and I'll send that to you in the mail after we're done here. But in addition to Curtis, there's 2 more guys I want to talk about. I want to talk about a gentleman who I've gotten to know over the last number of months, not years like in Curtis's case, but in months, but he's just really impressed me. His name is Ibi Syed, and Ibi is a co-founder of a company called Coursera. And I want to give Ibi what I'm going to call my Brains and Brawn Award, or think of it this way, as the smartest guy in the room that I've ever met award. And Ibi and his team at Coursera are building a business that's going to take off like crazy. And what they're talking about is creating something we're going to call an AI operating system for companies. And imagine having a layer that that's embedded in your IT tech stack. That's just all AI, and you could build and run various applications off of it the way you would off of an operating system. And Ibi and his team at Coursera have delivered on that. They're still young in the journey. They're still just getting started, but boy, have they hit the ground running. And so Ibi, here's to you, my friend. We're going to send you the Brains and Brawn Award. But the third one, another gentleman, and you guys probably mostly know him, if not all know him. His name is Bruce Temkin. And Bruce, I want to recognize you for a couple of things, not just for your customer experience impact that you've had professionally on me, but the fact that you made actually 2 significant changes in your life that I want to touch upon. And I don't want to put you on the spot here, but if you know anything about Bruce Temkin, you've seen both happen. The first thing I'm going to talk about is over the last few years, since largely during COVID, Bruce transformed himself personally. Bruce lost a lot of weight, and Bruce became very health conscious. And man, oh man, oh man, oh man, oh man. There's a whole new Bruce Temkin out there right now. And if you've not seen Bruce or talked to Bruce in a few years, take a look on the internet or go reach out to him and say, let's get together and talk. And the transformation, his physical transformation is striking. Bruce is a different guy. More recently than his physical transformation is the fact that you may have seen the news that came out earlier this year, back in the early springtime of 2024, when he announced out in the world that he's walking away from the role that he's loved at Qualtrics and going out on his own with something called Humanity at Scale. And I'll tell you that Bruce is doing some amazing things right now on his own with a small team of people to change and transform humanity and help people be more human to one another. You know, when Bruce made that announcement, the reason I'm recognizing this is not just because it's an admirable cause, but I'll tell you this, there's no bigger cause, there's no bigger guy out there that gave me the courage to take my own job that I had, that I loved up to that point, and walked away from that job the same way Bruce walked away from Qualtrics. And it was Bruce's announcement that gave me the courage to go do that. And so, Bruce, man, here's to you for giving me the courage to go start out on my own as a solo entrepreneur and go on this journey earlier this year alongside you. So thank you for that. So guys, Curtis Koff, Insulet Corporation, you got to reach out to him and get to know him. He's terrific. Ibi Syed from Quotera, check them out. The work that they're doing in AI is just groundbreaking. And then thirdly, Bruce Temkin, if there's 2 or 3 of you guys, of whoever's out there listening who don't already know Bruce, look him up, check him out. I think you're going to be pretty remarkably amazed by what you see out there. Bruce is an amazing thought leader, and I give him my Lifetime Achievement Award beyond anybody else in our space. Thank you guys for being who you are, for each of you. Let's talk about books for a moment. You know, I think back on a paper, a report that I had written up a while back. And, you know, I went out on a bit of a limb, probably now 8 or 9, maybe 10 years ago. And I wrote a report that got some notice out there. And if you think about contact centers in particular, customer service, customer care, even to a great extent, customer success, you know, you think about these groups that are largely contact center driven teams, telephonically equipped teams. You know, everybody talks about first contact resolution. Our customers having to call in more than one time to solve a problem. And everybody says the gold standard for those teams is 1. Why do they have to call more than once? Well, I went out on the limb when I wrote that paper, and I challenged even that thinking. And instead of talking about first contact or first call resolution, where we want to strive for 1, I said, let's strive for 0 contact resolution. And I think that that's an interesting standard. And why do our customers have to be the QA department, for lack of a better way of saying it to you? Why do our customers have to be the people who dictate, or who found that there's a problem going on and have to come tell us there's a problem and we need to resolve it? With all the amazing analytical tools and other types of insight generation tools, I wrote in that paper, and I think we could live up to the standard to this day, that we can detect the problem likely even before the customer knows he's had a problem. And if we fix the problem proactively in that context, the customer is never aware of the problem and he's never dissatisfied. So there is a book that I was given as a gift. It's written by Bill Price and David Jaffe, called The Best Service is No Service: How to Liberate Your Customers from Customer Service, Keep Them Happy, and Control Costs. This talks a lot about this idea that why do we need to provide service at all if in fact we could deliver exceptional services to begin with? And I think back, I think it was either Andrew Jassy, the current CEO of Amazon, or obviously you got Jeff Bezos before him, who said any call at Amazon to customer service is a failure. I think Bill and David in their book here talk a lot about the same ideas here. Any call into service is a failure, because that means, hey, I tried to do something and I couldn't do it. Now I need your help to get it done. And let's talk about that for just a second. I think this is a compelling concept. And I stand by the paper that I had written all those years ago and the book that those guys put together here as being, I think, the true gold standard that here in late 2024, we can all agree to strive for. The analytics, my friends, will tell us the story, right? And if we can use those analytics effectively to find out where those failure points are in the customer's journey and go fix them, orchestrate outcomes for those people before they notice it and solve those problems before they become problems, I think we're going to have a better overall customer experience by an order of magnitude. So guys, like with my other shows, if you're out there watching this show right now and would like a copy of this book, I'm glad to order copies for you. They're on Amazon, but I'll go spend the money for you and send you a copy as my gift to you for just watching the show and asking for it. So if you want the best service is no service, ping me here or on LinkedIn or through any other channel that you want and say, hey, send me a copy of the book. Send me your address if I don't already have it, and I'll get you a copy of that book. It's pretty awesome. Let's change gears for a few minutes. You know, one of the big topics that we've touched on here on this show in the past episodes is the viability of surveys. What role do surveys play amongst our customer experience work? And, you know, we all hear all the chatter. Surveys are old news. They're antiques. They're no longer worth it. They're no longer interesting. You know, surveys are dead. People are over-surveyed. Well, maybe not. And what I want to talk about for the next 10 or 15 minutes are just that. I really want to peel the onion back a layer or two about surveying and getting direct solicited customer feedback. Here's why. I'm inclined to believe that most surveys are, number one, self-serving. Number two, dreadful in design. Three, provide no benefit to the survey taker, to the customer sharing feedback through them. And if those things are indeed true, I believe surveys should die. But I think there's exceptions. And the exceptions I really want to talk about today are evidenced by one company on earth. And it's a company that I've chosen to partner with. They're called OPINATOR. And if you don't know OPINATOR, I hope you check them out. We're going to have Felipe from OPINATOR on here in just a second. And we're going to have a really good discussion about the premature speculative death of surveys. OPINATOR, my friends, if you don't know them, they've been around for many years, primarily in Europe and also to a great extent Latin America. And what they've been able to do is literally burn down to the ground what is a survey, and instead reinvent that survey in some magical and cool ways. And we're going to see some evidence of that and talk about that extensively in a second. So rather than be a bit of a spoiler here and preempt that part of the conversation, why don't we take a moment and just welcome my friend Felipe from OPINATOR onto the call, and we'll talk about this together. Hey, Felipe.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Thanks
for having me on.
No, good to be here with you. You
My
know,
pleasure.
I was mentioning a few minutes ago to the folks kind enough to listen to this program up to this point, and I hope you don't chase them away now that you're here. You know, the fact that I think, you know, surveys, when you think of a survey, you think of what looks like a test in school, right? You picture a whole bunch of questions, black ink, white paper, you know, radio buttons coming out at crazy times. And the reality is that I'm not sure that even matters anymore. And I'll speculate something, and I really want to hear your thoughts about this. You know, when 40 years ago, 50 years ago, people were doing surveys, they printed them on paper. They mailed them out. People took surveys and filled them in. And then, you know, people, you know, scanned them in and tabulated the results.
Yeah.
And then like 20 years ago, they moved them onto the internet. But when they moved them onto the internet, all they did was they took that same paper experience and they put it up on your screen. And I think what I want to talk about today with you is to understand OPINATOR and your view on what is a survey, what makes it interesting, how do you reinvent that paper experience into being something much more digital first, and what is that about? But before we do that, I realize that while you and I might be pretty good friends at this point, a lot of
Hmm.
folks might not know you in this program. So can we take a couple of minutes, talk about you, talk about OPINATOR, just kind of
Sure.
where the company's come from, kind of where you're at, who you are, and kind of what your role is in the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here and to be able to share not just what I've learned, but what I've been able to be a part of, which we'll get to. I think it's very exciting. To share a little bit about myself, I've been with OpenAtor for over 6 years now. I started as a customer success representative, which is one of the things that we're really proud of at OpenAtor. We really dedicate ourselves to our customers, right? We're not a company that's powered by support. It's more of an accompaniment, right? So I was boots on the ground with all my customers. I knew them by name. I knew what was going on within their account, what their challenges were, what their desires were long term. And that really put me in a position where I had the opportunity to learn what really were their needs. And many times they were coming from other providers where their limitations were exactly what you just said. No, no, what you have is a digital paper, right? And those limitations are include but are not limited to, you know, the lack of dynamic interactions, the lack of visual pull that these surveys had, the length that it took to collect valuable feedback, a representative amount of valuable feedback, and then at the point where you start to be able to analyze, react, and respond, there was a huge gap in time there, right? When these customers were with their previous providers, and it was actually a challenge when they onboarded OpenAtor. We said, "Why don't you do all these things?" And they would just ask us how, and we just said, "Well, the tool itself can do that for you, right? It can shorten the time of analysis. It can shorten the time of responding and reacting to your customer based on what they're saying, right?" And as I progressed within the company and got to know the co-founders better, they told me the story of how they saw exactly what you're saying happen, right? It went from paper to digital paper. And they said, how can we leverage this incredible digital space into a tool where we can have the same experiences we were having 50, 60 years ago, not in surveying, but in capturing customer experience, right? It's not the same. A survey is asking specific questions at a specific time, right? Having a conversation with a customer that's going to affect your customer experience is anything from the doorman at a bank, saying, "Hi, how are you, Mr. Mandel? How's the wife?" Right? That there's no surveying being done there, but it's part of a conversation that is going to feed the experience, the day to day, the relationship, right? And plugging that capability into surveys is how OpenInter was born, right? How do we keep surveying through conversation? How do we keep these interactions emotional and as human as possible, right? Excuse me. So as I developed within the company, I had the opportunity to go from, trying to get customers what they needed to a position where I had a level of, uh, we can call it influence as to how these companies decided to move forward long term. They said, okay, now we have this tool. Um, and I would jump in proactively and say, what if we do this? What if we do that? What if we try this other thing that I've never heard of before? Right. And that's really where I'm kind of at a crossroads. Are surveys dead? Yes, but can we redefine them and bring them back to life? Can they evolve and come back somehow? And I think that that's exactly what OpenAtor is doing.
That's really interesting. So it sounds like what you're seeing is an opportunity to bring what I'm going to use kind of a big concept word here, bring a level of authenticity,
Mm,
emotional authenticity
mhm.
into the feedback loop, which is going beyond, please fill in my form, which is what
Correct.
everybody comes to hate.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's interesting. So does anybody else do that? I mean, I think you guys are telling this story and it's pretty unique. I've not heard a story about when I think about, when we learn about how to do surveys back in survey school, they tell you
Mm,
things like, surveys cannot bias the customer. They teach every survey has to be bland and boring and not leading and not emotional and not this and not that, because it's going to make everything bad in terms of the research. And I'm going to use a challenging word here. I'm going to call BS on that whole problem.
mm,
And instead, come out and say, you know what? As CX professionals, our job is to make people excited about the brand and excited
mhm,
about the company and excited about the experiences that they just had. And the more that we can put a positive packaging
mhm.
on the feedback loop, I think the more it will remind people of the positives in the experiences that they've had. But they're inevitably
Absolutely.
had good and bad, but we want to remind them and reinforce the good. Is that fair thing to say?
Absolutely. I would go as far as to say that putting your brand on the experience, on the surveying experience,
Yep.
is a serious commitment, right? We invest in our brands and we have our marketing and advertising teams, dedicate hours, days, months to different campaigns, different strategies that are then, put up on Times Square, on huge billboards, deployed over social media campaigns.
Yep.
We should have the same amount of commitment and concern with our voice of the customer. And what do
I
I
agree.
mean by that? Right. Uh, a huge company, whether that's a retail company, a B2B company, if you put your logo on something, and not just your logo, but your whole look and feel, your different services or products that you have, if you include those in anything that you do, whether it's in digital or physical space, you're putting your stamp on that,
Yep.
right? The experience that your customer is going to have while interacting with that is everything. Right. And so you bring up a great point. And what we've done at Opinator is that is the first thing. We have a saying in Central America, comemos con los ojos. We eat with our eyes first.
Hmm.
Right. Um, and inevitably, if I see something that's bland, tasteless, and absolutely unemotional, it's going to generate zero interest in me to interact with it at all. And then there's a waterfall effect that's going to negatively impact the person that's presented that you know lifeless interaction to me. But a company that puts effort into what is this, we'll call it a survey for lack of better words, but what is this survey supposed to do? What is it supposed to do at an emotional level with this customer? What is this customer going through, and how do I put myself into their shoes? And the more resources you dedicate to having your brand be a part of that experience, the more you've committed that that experience has to be top notch, just like it would be anywhere else, at your stores, on your social media, et cetera, et cetera. Right. So I absolutely agree with you there.
I mean, what I hate hearing is when people tell me, "Who cares? It's only a survey,"
The
right?
worst. The
And,
worst.
and, and I believe, and tell me what your thoughts are about this. I think the act of asking a customer for feedback could be really a key moment of truth on their journey, right? It could be a key touch point on that journey. And
Absolutely.
the more we treat it like only a throwaway experience, the less we're going to benefit from it. And frankly, people are burned out by those crappy throwaway experiences. And I
Yeah,
think,
we were talking, sorry to interrupt you. We were talking the other day about the peak end rule,
yeah, exactly.
right? And for those of you who might not be familiar, the peak end rule is essentially customers are going to remember typically 2 points
Yep.
uh, within an interaction with you, whether that's perhaps I'm looking for gifts for my wife, and I go to a website, I consider something, I add something to the cart, I come back a few days later, right? That whole experience can take days, weeks, but a customer is going to remember 2 moments: the peak experience moment, where you were getting the most value,
Yep.
or highest level of emotion, right? And you're going to remember the last interaction,
Yep.
right? So I've paid, I just spent, I don't know, say $500 on
Yep.
something beautiful for my wife. I'm excited because she's going to be excited. I hope she likes it. And in that moment, my excitement is going to translate into a sort of like closeness with this brand, right? And in that moment is typically when companies decide, hey, let's ask a question, you know, or many don't and leave that moment as is, leave that opportunity, you know, unmined, if you will. And then 24 hours, 48 hours later, you know, their CRM triggers a survey. And by that time, I've already marked my experience with that brand, right? Whether that was a peak experience while shopping, a real negative experience while trying to pay for something, perhaps, and that last experience that I had, right? So it's a moment where we need to leverage that customer attention, that affinity, and notice how important the whole experience is, right? It's not that at the end of experiences we need to create one positive, like a shining light of the experience through our survey, but we need to know that that is definitely going to be a situation where our customer is going to remember us. What did they do? What did they want from me um, after they took my money, essentially, right? Do they want to know more about me? Um, did they take the time to listen, right? So I absolutely agree that that the peak end rule is something that we should consider more seriously, right? And that's placing our brand at those moments.
We're talking about a lot of big ideas here, and it dawns on me that a lot of these ideas are very visual. And I know that it's hard to imagine what you're talking about without seeing it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so I know we have a couple of screens teed up here. So I'm going to bring up a screen and let's just kind of
Mhm.
give our listeners a chance to kind of get a sense of what we're saying here, because I think it's really important that we take a look at this. And so what I want to do is kind of just jump to a screen like this
Hmm.
and have you describe what we're seeing here. Because I think understanding a screen like this is super key to understanding the kind of the whole thesis of what we're here to talk about.
Absolutely. So a moment ago, I used the term surveys instead, for lack of a better word. And the reality is we do have a better word. We've created it. We've come up with it, and that is OPIs. OPIs are our digital interaction formats, right? That's the ones that our platform helps our customers create. And these are absolutely code free. They're modular. They're essentially building blocks that can be composed of questions or I don't want to just say questions because sometimes it's, you know, just an input. I wish I had more examples here because we have so many. But essentially, these OPs kind of lay the foundation for a customer and a brand to have a conversation, right? And you see some of these, they're very different. The first one on the left is for a fashion brand, for example, and they sell bags and leather goods and shoes and accessories. And this is this is where I really think that this brand is saying, we're having a conversation with you now that is supported by who we are, what we believe, and how we want you to experience not just our brand when it comes to you and is in your hands, but also when you're speaking with us and getting to know us, right? So what you see here is a few questions. These are just some demos that we prepared, and as you can see, throughout the whole thing, I feel this brand speaking to me, right? I have this person who's using the eyewear, using the headwear, using the necklaces. We see bags, we see shirts, and the reality is, each time you include one of these elements into the interaction, you're getting closer and closer to what this interaction would be in person, right? You're at a store and you're saying, you know, what category do you like? And you show the wall, and the wall has the shoes, the accessories, the eyewear. You can touch it, you can feel it. If we take this digital landscape and don't use it at its maximum potential, we're wasting that opportunity, right? And the second example you see here is completely different. The font is different, the questions are different, the background, and this one, obviously, as you can see, is for one of our customers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they've gone on to use us at their stadium stores. And by that, I mean to say that these digital interactions have become so flexible that they don't just belong over digital spaces. They can be placed into the physical spaces that we navigate, and they continue that seamless brand interaction, right? And like I said, these are modular, these are building blocks, are super easy to use, to build, and they offer customers the opportunity to say, ooh, I had a new idea. We need to ask this other question in this other way with this other visual component. Let's clone this, change it up, deploy it. Let's try it, right? And that's another benefit of taking these surveys and really making them what they are, which is uh, a digital opportunity to speak. And that is, digital is now, right? If we leave anything for tomorrow, for next quarter, for next year, it'll be too late. That customer's attention is gone, right? Um, I'd like to know, Mark, when you see this, what do you feel that you've played around with OPs? What do you feel you're interacting with?
You
Because
know,
I'm sure the word survey didn't come to mind.
it doesn't in any way feel like a survey, but it's not just the look. I mean, even the words. You know, when you think about, again, comparing what we see on the screen to like a regular survey, a more conventional
Hmm.
survey,
Yeah.
think about how we learn how to write survey questions,
Hmm.
right? I mean, like we word things like, on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or colleague? You know,
Yeah.
who in their right mind talks like that? And there's no authenticity to that.
Yeah.
And Felipe, I'll dare say that if I was to kind of roll up to you in person, face to face, and ask you a question like, on a scale of 0 to 10, you know, you're going to be like, get away from me. You're weird. You know,
Yeah.
nobody talks like that. But
Yeah.
we all talk like that when we hide behind surveys, conventional, traditional surveys. And what I don't see is that in your work. What I see
Hmm.
is, you know, even though you're still measuring things like satisfaction, net promoter score, effort score, and other
Hmm.
types of quantitative and qualitative feedback, I don't see anything that feels so crazy and artificial as that. And you used the concept earlier. Imagine if this is more of a social setting. Imagine if we were kind of just two guys sitting around at a party or at a dinner talking.
Yeah.
That's the way I see the type of choices of language on these types of screens. That it's more conversational, it's more normal, it's more natural, and the
Yeah.
look and feel has nothing to do with that old school form. You know, the fill in my form, complete my
Yeah.
survey that makes people bananas these days.
Yeah. Yeah. I call it the SAT structure, right? I
Exactly.
remember taking the SAT and just at one point just saying, we'll scribble this one, scribble this one, scribble. I just wanted to get to the end of it.
Yep.
There's no reason why a company should say this is a good way for me to gather insight from my customer, right? And to your point, like I see this Steelers example, and one thing I notice is we say, for example, through which channel did you purchase your tickets for today's game, right? It's not it gives it a context, it gives it a time and place, right? We're talking about today. You did something today. We want to know about that. It's
Yep.
not what is your preferred channel of purchasing? No, no, like tell us about today,
Yep.
right? As human as we can possibly make it, from the visual element to the written element, and then we get to another point which I'm sure uh, other providers that try to democratize solutions like this offer, but this one's more for UCXers out there who are in charge of a CX program. Leverage responses, your responses to the customer. What do I mean by that? When you go and you finish a survey, if all you say is thank you for your feedback, we're working tirelessly to make your experiences better, you're leaving a lot on the table.
Yep.
Two things come to mind immediately. First of all, um, you better be thankful that they took the time out of their day to give you your feedback, right? That's a given. But you're not targeting, or you're not leveraging rather your promoters, right? And the Steelers took us up on this idea once, and we had an NPS question, and if that NPS was, I don't remember if it was 7 or 8 or above, then we showed them a special um, marketing campaign that was going around where you were signing up to a raffle, right? And the logic would support that if someone's willing to buy from you, they're willing to participate in your marketing campaigns, right?
Yep.
So the response page here was, hey, we have this thing going on where we're giving away a Ford F-150. Would you like to enter? And I forget the exact number, but the amount of people that said yes was incredible. It
Hmm.
was something like 9 out of 10 people. 9 out of every 10 people said yes. And just the fact that this customer has already interacted with your brand, maybe purchased something, and now they want to continue interacting with your brand, that says more. So two positive uh, instances says a lot about that person, right? And then that's where you open a whole can of worms. What else can we do for this person, right?
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
in the future, leverage them. They're not just a promoter; they're an affiliate of your brand. If at that point they're engaging and re-engaging, right? So that's something else I would highlight is what happens when the survey is done. You need to make the most out of that as well.
You know what else? I'm going to put you on the spot for just a moment, if that's
Oh
okay.
man, let's do it.
You know, I'm thinking back to a Forrester report that came out
Hmm.
before the pandemic, so pre-COVID. It was written by a woman at Forrester. She's still there, named Maxie Schmidt,
I know,
right?
Maxine.
And Maxie wrote, it was a report. I think it was, I'm paraphrasing now, but she wrote something. The name of that report was The Future of Customer Feedback or something thereabouts.
Hmm.
And this is in like 2018, give or take. So, 5 or 6 years ago now. And she talked a lot about this idea of the need for reinventing a survey. And she said,
Hmm.
by her estimation, there's so many surveys that are so conventional and so dreadfully boring out there that people are burned out by them and just turned off by them, first of all.
Yeah.
And the way she said that manifests, it's interesting. She said, we're being penalized in our conventional thinking in both the quantity of feedback that we get and the quality,
100%. Yeah.
right? People either are not taking the survey or they're rushing through it just to get done with it, not
Hmm.
to experiment with it. And I would think, looking at the screens here, on whether the Pittsburgh Steelers one or the fashion one here, I would think you're the opposite, right? I think you're going to get a lot more feedback and deeper feedback.
Hmm.
What where I want to put you on the spot is, if I was a conventional CX guy running my very popular Qualtrics survey,
Hmm.
I'm going to celebrate a 5% response rate, for
Yeah.
example, and go, boy, we got 5% back. It's way better than that 4% we got a month ago.
Hmm.
Right? What are you seeing? What's OPINATOR seeing in terms of response rates? Can you comment about that for a minute?
Yeah, I can't say specifically, which one of our customers are seeing exceptional response rates, but I can speak on one that I just saw recently, which was part of a purchasing process. I believe it was a post-purchase web survey, right? So
Mhm.
the example we were just talking about, someone completes a transaction, and this customer said, we already have their attention. I'd rather be brief and concise, but try to engage with them in that moment than 24 hours later send them an email and have that moment have disappeared, right? So they implemented this, and if I'm not mistaken, responses over the last 6 months varied between 40 and 50%.
Whoosh.
That is phenomenal, right? And that is the denominator there is visualizations, right? So I believe that they set, we're going to show this to 50% of everyone who purchases, right? So if you had 1,000 people purchase, 500 of those people were shown the OP, and of those 500, it was between a 40 and 50% response rate. That's
Wow.
incredible, incredible,
That's unheard
right?
of.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And when I saw it, I actually mentioned that to the leadership team, and quite, it was quite funny because they were not as surprised, right? And our leadership team is the people who built the solution, the people who have been searching for that for many many years. And they said, yeah, we actually just had another customer over in Europe say, um, they're actually a more newer customer, sorry. They were seeing responses of between 35 and 40%, and I think that was over email, right? So
Wow.
What I'm trying to say here is you can see phenomenal results in terms of response rates, but that is powered by not just the technology, but also a proper strategy, right? And that's that example of, when are you asking and how are you
Sure.
asking?
Sure.
So it's not a blind promise, but we have been very, very fortunate to see strategy and technology align to deliver super, super satisfying response rates.
But it does sound like Maxi's premonition about more, better feedback for people who do
Mm,
it thoughtfully. You guys are the guys who are making that come true. And
hmm.
that's pretty cool. Because again, I can't tell you how many surveys I get in my email every day. Right? I
Yeah.
mean, I do moderate travel for business and for home stuff, and I go out places. I interact with brands on a regular basis, and I'll tell you, I probably get 5 or 6 survey invitations a day
Yeah.
personally to go just a few minutes here, a few minutes there, and I ignore most of them. I might
Mm.
sometimes I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment because I'm a survey guy. So
Yeah.
I open them up and go, let's take a look. And I go, oh boy, another one like that.
Yeah.
And I sort of give it a half-hearted attempt. Or if there's some sort of gift, I get a gift card at the end, I might consider completing it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
otherwise I don't. And it feels like a missed opportunity, and it feels like I have better tolerance than most do for this stuff.
Yeah.
And it feels like, if people don't do what you're describing, they're going to shoot themselves in the foot, so to speak, and not get much of anything out of it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. And like I said, there are so I see it sometimes kind of on a scale of democratization, right? So we think of Google Sheets, right? Anyone, I used to use it when I was in college and trying to, do some polling. When you get to a company that's using Google Sheets, is probably, actually, I can't say who, but a multinational telco that we were recently having a conversation with said that many of their departments were still using Google Sheets to gather feedback from customers. And that was a negative wow moment for me. But
Yep.
what I was going to say is technology is there, and there are companies that are less easy to, let's say, acquire, technologies that are less easy to acquire for, whether that's a small, medium, or even a large business. And then there's others like a Google Sheets that are readily available. And there's somewhere in between there where I think OpenAtor is kind of at a sweet spot where it's easy to work with us. We're going to help you. We're going to provide that level of strategy conversation, because
Yeah.
it's not really a consultation. It's more of, let's sit down, let's have a conversation much like this one, where we want to help you achieve higher response rates and better quality data,
I
right?
think that's so important. You can't overstate the importance of that. I think that's so key. I know we're running long here, Felipe. So tell me,
Yeah.
how can our friends who might be listening in here, how can they find you in OpenAtor? How do they track you down?
So you can email me, fchamorro@openator.com. I will be happy to set up a call or just, respond to your doubts over email. You can find us at openator.com as well. Of course, we have contact sheets there, and that those will be redirected to me or to my colleagues. You can also find us on LinkedIn, of course. We'd be happy to have as many conversations as any of the listeners out there want to have.
Cool.
We're a very patient and very engaging company, so we're always happy to have interesting conversations.
That's terrific. I think that you guys are exciting to see because it's so easy, right? Just as a final thought here, it's so easy to fall into the trap of just seeing a company like Medallia or Qualtrics as kind of a leader in our space.
Hmm.
And I want to just make a platform that feels like that. And you guys said, you know what? That's boring. That's
Heck no.
dumb.
Yeah.
We want to do a different thing. We want to be who we are and kind of stand for the values that we have. And more power to you, my friend, for being the guys who stand out there and say, I want to be different. I
Yeah,
want to think of feedback as being an experience, for lack of a
that's
better word.
exactly right. Much like the intro video,
Yep.
pioneers, thinkers.
And I love that end of that ad, right? It's the people who are crazy enough to think they could change the world are the ones who do.
That's exactly right.
So, that's a fun way to look at that. So, Felipe, thanks for hanging out here, man. It's good to spend some time with you. And friends, I know we're running up against the hour here, so I'm going to simply sit here knowing that next week is Christmas week, and I really wanted to wish all of you guys out there the very happiest of holidays, the merriest of Christmases, the safest and happiest of New Year's ahead beyond that. And thank you again for coming on this journey this year with me here in 2024. 2025 is going to be even bigger and even better. And I'm excited to see how that plays out. Just as a little bit of a teaser, what's coming, the January show of Tales from the Trenches, I'm going to have a good friend of mine who I gave an award to earlier, Ibi Sayed, a gentleman who co-founded a company called Kotera, join me on this program, and he's going to talk a lot about building an AI operating system for your company. So I hope you come back in January for that. But in the meantime, guys, have a happy holiday ahead. Felipe, thank you for hanging out.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for being here with Felipe and me today. Stay well, my friends. Stay safe. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. And we'll see you soon. Take care, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye now.